Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 157 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome back to the show. In this episode, we're going to wrap up our episodes here in You Want to Get Into Long Range Shooting. In this one, we're going to talk about bits and bobs, all the things you need to think about, product that we really recommend to new shooters to get the most out of their equipment and learning the art of fundamentals. And then we just finished up a video series on talking about what you need to do in the field when you're getting ready to make calls at long distance. So it ought to be a great podcast. So without further ado, here we go. So before we get started, I would like to say a quick thank you to TriggerTech. TriggerTech is the maker of fine rifle triggers. They make lots of different makes and models for different rifles. We put them in all of our custom rifles here. The reason we put them in is they're safe, they're end-user friendly, and for you, if you're looking for an aftermarket trigger, they're end-user adjustable, and installation is nice and easy. So they make lots of different makes and models for lots of different rifles. So if you want to upgrade your rifle and your shooting, stop over to triggertech.com today. That's triggertech.com. We'd also like to thank Krieger Barrels. Krieger makes fine-cut rifle barrels. They're made in the great state of Wisconsin. They are a family-owned and operated business. We have been doing business with them for decades. They probably make what we would consider the finest rifle barrels in the world. And that's just proof in the systems that we put out there and all the testing and evaluation that we do. They really are, and have honed in decades and decades and decades of building world-class barrels. So they have been a part of our show and sponsors since the beginning, so we do want to say a thank you. And they also have a new program called Krieger Direct, where you can stop over and order your barrel and have it in as little as 2 to 3 business days. So if you want the best and you need it now, stop over to kriegerdirect.com. That's kriegerdirect.com today. So you want to get into long-range shooting. This podcast here is going to be about bits and bobs, advice that we would give ourselves from 20, 30 years ago, if we were talking to our younger selves and saying, hey, look, here's the things you need to take into consideration, and these things are important, and here's why. Before we get really diving into it and talking about the different parts and pieces, I just want to take time to talk about why it's so important to think about this stuff when you're purchasing it. Anything you add or take away from your rifle can have a pro and a con. So anytime you purchase a new piece of equipment, it can be good, but it can also have issues. It can introduce errors. It can introduce binding points when you put it on. It can interfere with your scope, your bolt clearance. It can interfere with how you like to use a shooting bag. It can catch on things that you normally have or use in the field. Anytime you add equipment to your rifle, you are adding the possibility of, you might get the pro that you're trying to get with it, or the purchase of that piece of equipment, but you always have to watch out for the negative or the con. There is a yin and yang effect that happens here when people put equipment on their rifles. We see it here at the school. Most of the time, it's not because they didn't want to buy the right things. They were just sold the wrong things, or they purchased what they thought was the right thing without knowing that these things happen, and here's why you want to purchase these things. So right out of the gate, let me dive into price. And we're talking about the final parts of this is just going to be the little accessories you're going to buy, things that you're going to need for your rifle. Price doesn't always mean better here. One of the things you have to be careful of, especially when we start talking about a subject like bipods, you now can spend $500 and $600 on a bipod, and possibly more. And we have seen some of them come through. Are they zombie apocalypse, got to shoot now in 30 seconds capable? Probably. Are they super stable? No, I don't think they are. Are they able to make you shoot the best groups of your life? No, they're not. They're an all-purpose, all-terrain Jeep tire. They're not meant to be put on a Ferrari or a Tesla or whatever your sports car or race car that you're into, right? But they do good at a lot of things, and they do it quickly, including all these different positions that you can get into, uneven surfaces, stuff like that. So don't think because you're buying the most expensive that you're buying the best. The other thing is, Keep it simple. Like, this is just straight up advice that if my father, my grandfather was looking over my shoulder, that if things that I'm telling you here, that they would just nod their head and smile and say, yeah, he's got that right. It's just good, wholesome advice to say, here's where shooter comes first. Equipment is just to help you get the job done. It's not going to make you shoot better. It's just going to allow you to shoot. And in some cases, can interfere with that, right? So I'm going to go over a list of things that you need to purchase, and you'll be surprised how small it is. We're talking about you've got your rifle. You've opened up your rifle case. There it is. The clouds part. The sun comes out, shining on it. There's this beautiful new rifle, and you are super excited to get out there and start putting it through its paces. What do you need to do to get it to run to its fullest abilities? And then we're going to give some bonus content here at the end. The first thing you need to do is you need a good bipod, and not good as the most expensive, the most stable. And so the two bipods that I would recommend, and I'll put this in the notes here down below, I really recommend the Atlas C.A.L. Gen 2, and I really recommend a Harris. I know some people out there might be like, oh my God, what's a Harris? The reason I would recommend a Harris, whether you get the S version, you want to make sure that you can level the rifle up, right? And then you can get the notched legs, or you can get the smooth legs where you just have to have this little knurled screw that you have to hold it in place with. The reason I recommend those two is, and believe it or not, there's probably a $200 price difference, but again, we're not talking about $600-$700 bipod. They're stable. They're super stable. You learn and master the art of fundamentals of marksmanship prone. You apply that skill set to every other position, but you can only master it prone. If you're not in an ideal or less than stable condition, that is not training, that is application, right? You're putting your skills to the test, but you master those skills by learning the core parts of shooting, and that is fundamentals of marksmanship. If you put something underneath your rifle that wobbles and moves and flexes and bows, like a lot of these tripods and bipods that you'll see people put under their rifles, it is hurting you. You no longer are learning the art, you're learning the limits of your equipment. As you're shooting, the rifle's not recoiling the way it's supposed to. It's not tracking the way it's supposed to. When you're loading the bipod or pushing the rifle forward to get a little bit of tension on the back or the buttstock, those feet and legs are bowing, they're flexing, they're moving. If you slide your rifle back and forth and it's going ching, 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 and the feet are just kicking back and forth, locking, and you've got a lot of movement, or if you put your hand on right above your bipod and push down a little bit and start rocking it back and forth, if those legs are flexing and bowing, maybe ideal for a sheep hunt if you're looking for a 3-ounce bipod. But what we're talking about here is the whole concept of this is so you want to get into long-range shooting, and you've got to get the fundamentals down. And you cannot do that if you've got bald tires on your car. You have to have a good, sturdy bipod. So Harris would be my first choice for those who said, hey, $120, they are still legitimate bipods. Do not buy the knockoffs. I am telling you, we've seen them come through the school here. They don't lock up. A lot of them don't pan or tilt, so you can't level the gun up. The feet are clanky. They're just straight up. They're awful. So unless this is just a gun you're given to a 12-year-old, you want to look the part, buy that. Those are children's toys. They're not legitimate bipods. Please, 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 if I can give you any advice, we've seen them come through the school here many, many, many times, and we've watched people suffer the consequences. So a Harris would be the one I would recommend if you're on a budget. And the Atlas C.A.L. is the other one. We use both at the school. They do make other versions of the Atlas. They make a much heavier duty version you would consider for like long range shooting. They also make versions that are, I think, the PSR, which is allows you to pan and tilt, so you can pan. But for learning the art of fundamentals, stay with the C.A.L. Gen 2 if you buy the Atlas, because you just don't want to have the feet panning and moving around and one more thing moving while you're trying to learn and master the art of the fundamentals. You're going to need a scope level. You're going to need a level for your rifle to tell you that you're level when you're shooting and practicing. At long range, this makes a difference in the fact when you roll your rifle up to level it up, that's going to allow you to track straight up and down with the bore to the reticle. If you tilt or roll your rifle left or right, in other words, making it unlevel, you're swinging the barrel underneath the optics like a pendulum, and it will affect your accuracy or your point of impact at distance. So having a bipod that allows you to level the gun, in this case, they make some aftermarket parts for Harris that gets rid of a little knurled nut back there. I think KMW makes one. I think they call it an S-lock or something like that. But it's basically a little lever that fits on the back of the Harris that allows you to loosen it to level the gun or to lock it up. So once you level it, it stays locked. So when you work the bolt, it doesn't flop left and right. The Atlas has a tensioner, and you do want to keep tension on that. So what I'm talking about is when you put your bipod on your gun, there's another little, usually a tensioner. In some cases, it's a giant nut. Sometimes you can replace it with a little lever or handle, like on a Harris. But basically, it's like a friction lock that allows you to add a little bit of friction to the tension. That way, you got a little bit of resistance when you're leveling the gun up, and then you don't have to constantly reach up and loosen, unloosen. Just keep some friction on it. It's just stiff enough that you can turn it, and that you're not going to break it. But when you're working the bolt, the gun won't roll over on you. So we're trying to be able to level the gun with that friction in place, and then keep shooting. We don't want to have to constantly reach up and undo that. With the scope levels, it's your cup of tea. They make everything from these ones that flash like the police are pulling you over, to ones that mount on your optics, to ones that mount on your rail. My personal favorite is the U.S. optics that mounts to the rail. They make a folder, and then they make a non-folder. The folder sticks out a little further, so basically while you're laying on your rifle, you can actually open your left eye, be looking straight underneath your windage knob or your parallax knob, and look at your level while you're shooting. That's priceless. It sticks out a little bit further so you can see it. The non-folder actually stays tucked in a little bit tighter to the rail. I prefer the non-folder on my hunting gun because it's shorter, and it's sort of protected by either your windage knob on a collis on the left side, or if you have a parallax knob over there. So it tucks it in so it can't break, and it always stays out. So for me in a hunting situation, the last thing I want to do is pull up to shoot, get all ready, and look up my levels folded, like the folding version of it, and I got to reach up and unfold it. I'm just burning valuable seconds. So in a hunting gun, I always want to leave that exposed and out so I can see it at any time. I pull the rifle up, I can open my left eye and look right at it. I'm not a big fan of the ones that you see that mount up on the scope high. And me personally, I'm getting older, so I'm not perfectly satisfied with the ones that are always in the chassis as well. The reason being is we found that they can be off a little bit, number one. And number two is I got good vision, but they're so close to your face that you're looking down literally right underneath your cheek at the back of the rifle, and you're trying to see this level that's 2 inches from your face, then you're going back and looking through your optics out to 600 yards. Where the U.S. optics one is just forward of my left eye about maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 inches, and it's in my peripheral vision. I can see it. I don't have to focus on it, and I'm not trying to strain my eyes looking long range and looking real close. Think of holding a book 2 inches from your nose and trying to read it real quick, and then look at a wall 10 feet away. A, it'll drive your eyes bonkers, and B, just makes you dizzy, right? So this is me sharing with you what my favorites are. And by the way, none of these companies outside of our 3 sponsors, we do business with them, but none of these are plugs. I'm not trying to give you a promo code to link down below to click on to give this discount code, and I get a kickback from it. I get nothing from the things that I'm talking about here. The only money we receive from the podcast are from Patreon supporters and from the 3 sponsors that we actually have, or 3 advertisers that we have on the show. So on the scope level, my favorite is U.S. Optics. The rifle sling is another thing that I think every shooter should have. And they make everything from, if you look at the competition-based ones that have like a little hook that goes around your arm, they make so many versions, and some of them exceptionally fancy, some of them, lock into your body. The only thing I can tell you about a rifle sling is I am old school, right? I have a sling that's attached just so I can slip my arm through it, wrap it around, and have control of the rifle. It is a very simple sling. It does not fit around my bicep and tighten up. I'm not trying to give blood, nor do I want to stop the circulation to the rest of my arm. And I'm not knocking anybody that uses these types of slings, but my rifle sling is actually meant to be A, to carry the rifle, B, an additional accessory that we can use to support the rifle in the off case that we want to use it or need it, right? So I just use, honestly, a very simple, straight, adjustable sling that just attaches with flush cup so I can unhook it off my rifle easily. I mean, I've used, just There's really no brand that I can tell you because I have a couple different ones and none of them are really big name brands. They just have the 1.25 inch flesh cup on them, and they're just a very simple adjustable sling. Some of them you can adjust a little bit quickly for length, and so if you got your backpack on, you can give yourself a little bit more breathing room, or if you want to tighten it up a little bit more. But really, I set my sling up so I can carry it, and then it's set so I can wrap my arm through it, just like traditional sling shooting. It never moves, and I'm not big into chasing all the accessories. I know that a lot of people will shoot better with those types, and in match shooting, I can see the value of it for sure. I mean, you're trying to ring out every point that you can, but we're talking about what I would consider learning the art of fundamentals and not using equipment too much. We're trying to learn how to shoot with a sling, not how to master a sling that's designed to game the system. So I'd rather just take a good old rifle sling and sling up. Like there's the Appleseed, that's a 22 long rifle type sling shooting. I think it's a great course. We were just talking about it in the last long range shooting school. The value that customer seen in that 22 course was just unbelievable in shooting slung. And I think it's a lost craft. You know, it's one of those things that, yeah, it's meant to carry the rifle, but boy, when you want, it really can settle down the rifle a little bit and give you a little bit more control over it. So rifle sling. On the rifle sling, I know I touched base on this once, but make sure you use flush cups on your rifle stock, and that way, and the quick detach ball. So there's a sling swivel stud that you can purchase that you just basically push a button and your sling and swivel come right off the rifle, right out of the way. So like if you go with like a Macmillan stock or something like that, it usually has the flush cups on the bottom and the front or on the sides. If you don't want your sling on the gun that's getting in the way, you can just push two buttons and your sling's gone, which I find to be really, really nice. So that's the only advice I can give you there is a good sling. Pick one that you like, good quality. I wouldn't get one that's super grippy, grabby on you. Some of them have like a texture type material. A good leather sling or just a nice, good adjustable sling that you can get to fit you properly is absolutely fine. Shooting bags. We talked a little bit about this in the last podcast where we were talking about the industry and how many bags have been ripped off and people really, just selling a lot of stuff. I'm a big, firm believer in doggone good shooting bags. I know they don't make them anymore, but those little 2x3x4 squares or 1x2x3, however you want to do them, but they're just basically little square blocks that have an adjustability. If you roll them, you can make them a little bit taller. Those are probably my favorite field bags. I think somebody makes one now and it might be Armageddon, that's almost air-filled. It's very stout, so it's not mushy, but I would have a good shooting bag for the field shooting portion and something like the doggone good or along that lines. And then I would have a training bag. This part I think is really important. There's a company here in Pennsylvania called Protector. It's called a 13B bunny ear bag. They are just fantastic for new shooters to learn and start working with the fundamentals of marksmanship because they teach you how the rifle is supposed to feel through recoil, and they buffer you just a little bit from the rifle being able to wiggle while you're pulling the trigger and settling up. Once you learn how that's supposed to feel, then you can shoot using the same exact technique, but with a bag out of there. In other words, you're using your fingers to pinch the bag to hold the rifle into place, but then when the bag's gone, you're using your fingers to pinch the rifle. It's the same exact technique. So I never like to bring anything into the shooting school here that teaches you that equipment is the key to how you shoot. Anything that we use, I don't want you to depend on it. I want you to learn. It's about mastering the art of the fundamentals of marksmanship, not mastering equipment. And so I'm always really careful that I don't introduce a bunch of stuff that gets people way above their pay grade faster, but then teaches them that the only way that they can shoot that way is using that equipment. And this is the scenario where I would say that they're a really nice leather-made bag. They're really popular in bench rest, but for new shooters, it's just like putting training wheels underneath the back of your rifle a little bit. Just gives you a little bit of a chance to get the rifle settled down and track it into your shoulder so you know what that's supposed to feel like. And then when the bag's gone, you know how it's supposed to feel. You'll know if it's a good shot or not. And so I will recommend not just a field bag for hunting, right? But I would certainly recommend using something like the Protector for training. So it's called a Protector 13B. I believe they're on our website. I'm not sure. I have to take a look. A lot of the stuff will be up there. We sell this stuff regularly here at our store because of the shooting school. You're more than welcome to purchase it. They're heavy. We send them out either empty and you fill it with doll fill yourself, or you can have them sent out with sand. But it's a very common thing we use here at the school and are used to help people master the art of fundamentals. The last thing on my list here that I want to talk about is the shooting mat. Now, before we get on to the shooting mat, I do want to say a quick thank you to MDT. MDT is a proud sponsor of the show. They make lots of great different chassis for both custom rifles and a lot of aftermarket chassis for factory rifles. So one of the things to be able to shoot at distance and to really help you, the shooter, is to get the rifle to fit you well. And if you plan on shooting beyond 700 yards, it really does have to fit you perfectly. And a lot of times getting an aftermarket stock that fits you well really pays dividends to the shooter. So if you would like to upgrade your rifle, factory or custom, you can stop over to mdttac.com. That's mdttac.com, and look at all the great selections they have today. So the shooting mat is one of those things that we see here at the school. This is going to be quick and clean. You want the mat basically to keep you out of the mud and sort of try to keep you dry. It should not be a Serta Perfect Sleeper. It shouldn't be 3 or 4 inches thick to when you lay on it. It's like a mattress. Remember, your rear bag sets on this mat. And so our mats basically are simply a very super thin material that's sort of waterproof that we can throw out on the ground, and we're not just getting coated in mud and dirt if we use it. Now, in match shooting and a lot of the other events, I can't tell you the last time I've taken a shooting mat. If it's raining out, the top of the mat turns into a mud puddle. So you just shoot. If I'm on a hunting trip, well, maybe if you want some place to set that you're not going to get all muddy, take your little mat. You could always use it as a little shoulder half if you had to keep the rain off of you, I guess. But if you're going to train and you're going to use a mat, just make sure that you buy one that's super thin and that it just keeps you clean and keeps you dry. If you buy one that has a little padding in it, I guess it's okay as long as that padding can compress with your rear bag and the bag isn't floating around on it moving. Think about like if you took your rear bag and sat it on a 6-inch mattress, the bag just wants to fall away and sink and move around. And under recoil, what's it do? It's like somebody jumping on the bed, right? It just sinks right down. So you want something very thin as possible, and you want something that's just basically going to keep you clean and dry. And our mats here, I think guys are stunned that they're basically just a super thin material. There's no padding to them whatsoever. And I want to make sure that the mat just keeps them sort of clean, gives them something to set their rear bag on. They can lay on it. I'm not going to hit a bunch of dirt and mud all over them. And that's it. I mean, it's small. If I roll it up, you could hold it like a football. I can throw it in my pack. It hardly weighs anything. But if you're going to use a shooting mat, be really careful that you don't buy these really expensive or really thick shooting mats, because they'll mess with you fundamentally, because your rear bag doesn't have anything really in contact with the ground. You now got a cushion between the ground and the bottom of your shooting bag underneath the rear of the rifle. And that's not going to help you learn a lot with fundamentals. If anything, it's just going to introduce error. So just to share with you a quick story with this, we had a customer here. His name is Dave, and Dave has been a frequent flyer here at the school. He's been to the school many times. He's a great customer, and actually consider him quite a good friend. Went down and joined him, helping set him up his reloading room. He's getting into reloading, has all this new reloading equipment all set up. We're all unboxing it and set it up on the bench. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed spending some time with him. But when he was here at the school, because I think he has some ribs and problems, he doesn't like to lay on anything that's hard, right? And so he brought this mat that was like 3 or 4 inches thick. It was ungodly thick, and it looked super comfortable to lay on. I'm not going to lie. If I was taking a nap, that's probably what I would buy. But it took me forever to convince him that, here, Dave, we got to get rid of this. No, this works fine. It works fine. And so, in teaching, you always try to sort of, it's almost like you're pulling them off, and come on now, let's try this, and you're trying not to be, damn it, get rid of the mat, And finally, I got him convinced to get off that mat, and let's throw out one of our school mats here. And we don't sell the mats that we use here. Just buy anything in a piece of material that you can find out there. The ones that we bought were sold through Mile High Shooting in Denver, Colorado. Anyway, so I got him to get off the mat. And it was like a 180-degree shooter. I mean, he was like, wow, this is pretty awesome. And he just couldn't believe that something so simple as a mat changed his shooting. Because, I mean, I don't want to say that he was all over the place, but he wasn't shooting well, that's for sure. And he was getting these constant crazy flyers, and it was the mat. And so it's like one of those things, I know it is. and I'm trying to convince him to try something differently without being overboard and, saying, damn it, I'm going to burn that thing if you don't get off of that. So I finally got him to get onto a regular thin mat, and then he was like, that's unbelievable. So I'm sharing this with you because I've seen lots of people bring these really thick mats to school here, and you will not shoot as well. You can't support the rear of the rifle if something soft is underneath your rear bag. And so just be mindful of that. So in the fundamentals of marksmanship, we just finished up a video we posted up for our online long-range shooting school, and I believe we're on episode 48. So I don't know how many hours and hours and hours we have up, but I thought this one was a really good one because we talked about what you need to do after you learn the art of the fundamentals of marksmanship. And a lot of it has to do with the weather, a lot of it has to do with trajectory, a lot of it has to do with fundamentals. And fundamentals are always in the mix, right? And so when we were talking about this, what I found pretty amazing, and we filmed it, this was, I think, released last Saturday, was I'm taking everything to do filming at the range, finally get to do a little bit of shooting. And everything I'm talking about here in this podcast, it's like, there's nothing more I can say other than this is the core fundamentals. So if you looked at my rifle in these videos, or if you go over to Patreon, you might see like a little clip of it, but you'll see a bipod, an Atlas CAL, you'll see a projector bag, you'll see a very thin mat, you'll see my scope level on the rifle. Everything that I'm talking about here is what we use. We're not salesmen in the fact that we're trying to sell you everything under the sun and make this a gear fest. We're just shooters that love to do what we do, and we're blessed that we get to be in this industry. And we're trying to share with you honestly the things that you need and the things that you really want to pay attention to when you're purchasing it to get it right the first time so it doesn't come back and bite you, right? So a couple other quick announcements. We do have a program called the Wolf Pack. You can stop over to Patreon if you'd like to support the show. It's $3 a month. We certainly appreciate that. Thank you for everybody who had signed up for that. Don't forget, we also have our new online long-range shooting school. Again, we're on episode 47, which is pretty awesome. And we're just getting ready to get into session 3. So we've got a whole 1/3 more to go before just the core content is up. So it's been a labor of love. It's been going great. It's like how do you need an elephant? It's one piece at a time. This has been a big project. So the content has hours and hours and hours and hours of video content in there, and it's all instructional. We really appreciate everybody that signed up for it. You can learn more. And one of the things with the online long-range shooting school was to be able to teach everything that we do here, but really have people be able to enjoy it from the comfort and convenience of their own home. So eventually I'm going to get old. I got called old in a meeting 2 years ago. I'm 50, right? I'm 51. So I'm not that old, but eventually I'm going to get old. And really one of the things I wanted to do with the online school is to have something that would outlive me, outlast me, that 2 or 3 years from now, if something happened that I can't teach anymore, if I get injured or hurt, that we have something to archive the actual school itself and everything that we taught, and that may actually out-survive me, which would be really awesome, just to pass along everything that we've learned and shared with really tens of thousands of hours of doing this over a lifetime. So the online long-range shooting school is a monthly fee. It's $49 a month. You can sign up for the year, and you can unsubscribe and resubscribe. So what's nice is if you go through the course, then next year you want to come back and take some refreshers, you can resubscribe, go back through, watch your core videos. We think that's pretty awesome. The one thing we're going to piggyback on top of this, not trying to make this a sales pitch for the online school, is if you take the online school next year, we will offer a 1-day class, which is going to be the master class for online long-range school participants, that they can take the course or the bulk of the course from their home and then come in and spend the day for a shooting session with it. So rather than spending 3 full days here, for those that really get time is money, right? And coming in for 3 days for a long-range shooting school, we think it's awesome. The customers that come in think it's awesome, but it's not on everybody's cards. So if we can get them the bulk of the actual classroom training and get all that embedded before they get here, then we can focus 1 day on all the shooting and let them actually learn and apply everything from the shooting portion here under guidance. But they can get the core of the material, the bulk of the material from home and actually be prepared before they get here. We think that's pretty awesome too. So if you want to sign up or you're interested, you can stop over to our website. It's wolfprecision.net, and it's our online long-range shooting school. To click you over to Patreon. Once you're registered, just go back to our homepage and follow the videos in order that they are posted. The other thing I want to say thank you for is if you're listening to the podcast and you enjoy long-range shooting, if you don't mind sharing it, we really appreciate that. If you know somebody that's into long-range shooting, if you would, leave a nice comment. We certainly appreciate that. That helps us a lot with our ratings. And then also don't forget to subscribe or get notified when we post up new content. We really appreciate that. It helps us a lot as we keep growing and moving forward with the podcast. This is going to be something that we're going to continue doing for years. And so as we keep moving along, guest speakers are coming on. We'll have some of the guys from IBI Barrel coming on soon. We'll have Dr. Romello coming on here, I believe, in September. So we're really trying to make this a nice weekly podcast where eventually we're going to start bringing on a lot of guests from the outdoor industry to share all of their experience as well. And it is sort of a labor of love. It's a lot of work that goes into it on the backside, but just really getting an opportunity to share everything that we have out there and put out some good content that maybe somebody can use, change their shooting, upgrade their abilities, just share with them something that maybe has some value to them. It means a lot to us. And so we're really looking forward to continuing the podcast for many years to come. So anyone that supports the show, we certainly appreciate it. But don't forget to subscribe so when new releases are out there that you get notified, and we usually release once a week. So thank you everybody for taking the time to join us. The next podcast we're going to be talking about and getting into shooting is really talking about some caliber selections again. I know that we talk a lot about the 22 Creed, and we have built a ton of 22 Creeds and have a lot of really happy customers shooting it as well. But caliber becomes a big deal, and it becomes a really big deal here if you want to learn. And we see it here at the school all the time. So the next podcast we're going to post up is going to be on caliber selection, and caliber consideration. So until then, thank you everybody for taking the time to join us. We really appreciate it. My name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host, and you're listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.